Okay, my name is Mackenzie Cook, and my social problem that I chose to examine this semester was child abuse and how that is perpetuated by society. So first, the influence of society. Many people's actions are influenced by opinions, thoughts, and dynamics of their surrounding society that they live in. In the case of child abuse, several elements of societal problems such as deviance, social inequality, problems within education, and vulnerable populations all contribute to this issue. Other very important factors to consider in relation to child abuse are mental illness in parents, substance abuse, and experience that they could have had with their parent abusing them. These situations can stem from unhealthy surrounding communities, a struggling marriage, or other environmental factors, which include the burdens of poverty or the stress of a job. However, it is ultimately really important to realize that child abuse is a combination of multiple societal, environmental, and individual factors add up to create situations where a child is put in danger due to their parents. Oftentimes, they're unable to escape their situation because of their parents and family members that do threaten them. And since children understand they should love and trust their parents, they're often silenced, which is why this problem is so widespread and many people have trouble recognizing it. Okay, so the social context of child abuse. This was not always recognized as a social problem. In fact, child abuse has existed for many centuries before this one, and it was not ever defined as a social issue until recent years. Um, in order for a social problem to become recognized, groups of influence such as legislators, social workers, and even parents have to collectively begin to agree that, in this case, abuse was damaging to children. Children who were abused began to grow up and integrate into society, but they were not able to function as others because of the mental and physical trauma that they had sustained from their early years of childhood. And therefore, the child abuse can present itself in several forms, including sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, which has now been made illegal almost everywhere across the nation. Throughout history, different forms of child abuse have also been seen as methods of discipline, which is also why this hasn't been recognized as a social problem until these later years. And it was also used in schools, not just by parents either. School systems have since fallen away from using physical force as a form of punishment, which would be completely formidable if it was done today. Therefore, the social context of problems is very important to consider because society does take it upon themselves to define which norms are acceptable and how others deviate from the expectations that are considered normal in the time of society. Okay, so what contributes to child abuse? To begin, the general definition for child abuse is anything that falls under the category of physical or verbal behavior that is violent, negligent, demeaning, or invasive to a child, which includes three main forms. There is physical, psychological, and sexual abuse, which are generally patterns of domestic violence. Defining the scope of child abuse in relation to historical treatment of children is extremely crucial because it helps to bring awareness to this social problem. Actions that today would be considered outrageous examples of child abuse were oftentimes considered legal and even normal methods of discipline throughout history. Many researchers have distinguished a difference between emotional abuse which is where a parental act must be commissioned toward the child, versus emotional neglect, which consists of emotional maltreatment. Many debates have been had over this, but it is widely considered both are extremely impactful and can affect the neurological development of children. This issue can follow a child all the way into adolescence and affect their ability to form future relationships because of their lack of consensus regarding operationalized definition of child abuse. Since the ability to improve the identification, prevention, and treatment of emotional abuse is significantly limited because of the lack of a single definition for child abuse and a single solution. The three sociological perspectives exist in order to provide reasons to why this problem exists, as well as how it can be solved. So first, the functionalist perspective. Functionalists view society as a system of interrelated parts which work together to produce a society which is able to sustain itself. Therefore, each person contributes and plays their part in order for the whole to work. So, to provide an example of this, take schools, whose purpose is to prepare the youth for various positions in society. Yet, when a school does not prepare children, they have more difficult times getting jobs and providing for themselves and their families. This is a very common problem that many fall victim to when they cannot handle the stress of life. It creates feelings of anger and frustration, which, if not confronted properly, can transform into substance abuse issues. Therefore, if this person who is failed by the school system initially in their early years of their life, they can start to take their stress and anger out on their kids because they're not being able to sustain themselves, and physically, mentally, emotionally abuse them. In addition, children sometimes are also neglected because the parent simply cannot provide for them and they can become malnourished. According to the functionalist perspective, this child is already unprepared to fill the roles of society because they can be accompanied by mental disorders, physical disabilities, and substance abuse issues because of how they were treated as a child. The parent's failure to perform its functions now result in the consequences of social disorganization and the continued cycle of child abuse, which can limit opportunities of some people to develop valued skills and abilities. The conflict perspective contributes to the social problem of child abuse because it is based on the idea that society consists of different groups that struggle against one another to obtain regarded resources that are considered valuable. For example, educational opportunities are more available to the affluent because it benefits this group the most, and become a problem when powerful groups feel that they are not getting what they deserve from learning institutions. Therefore, child abuse can be seen as a power struggle in family relations. When a parent feels as if they are losing control of their kid because they have grown deviant or independent, they might end up resorting to abuse in order to feel as though they are still in a higher position than their child. This social change that occurs within families always results with a winner and a loser when analyzed through the conflict perspective. Hence the reason that sometimes the parent will take extreme measures to be the winner and remain in control of the role they pursue is good for the child. Children are more likely to submit to a violent parent and become scared to speak out against what is happening to them. Therefore, they obey their parents because they fear punishment. They fear the punishment that will follow their deviant actions. The symbolic interactionist perspective also explains child abuse through a different lens. This perspective is all about how humans possess the ability to use symbols in order to attach meanings to words and events. For example, taking this perspective and focusing on the interaction between a parent and a child in a familial relationship and recognizes the social expectations and meanings that are a part of that interaction and how they play a powerful role in what children tend to learn and accomplish from their parents. Therefore, labeling a child as deviant can create a self-fulfilling prophecy when that child begins to conform to the expectation that has been attached to them. If a parent labels their child as deviant and tries to discipline them with forms of abuse, that label and experience will carry through that child's whole life and lead them towards a lifestyle of crime, drugs, and other deviant groups that accepts those who feel as though they don't fit in where they were supposed to. When children are labeled and abused for their labels that have been given to them, others start to see them in that light as well, such as teachers and peers. This label not only of deviance, but a child abuse victim will stick with them for the rest of their lives and affect their future prospects of getting a job, having a future relationship, and their mental health. The result of the reactions of those around the child will most likely reinforce the label as well, such as a parent abusing their kid for deviance. Hence, the labelers create what they were initially thought they were merely identifying in the first place due to the reinforcing self-fulfilling prophecy of the label. Deviant children become a social problem when a parent attempts to control them through abuse and end up producing stigmatizing results, which include lower self-esteem, mental health issues, substance abuse, and even abuse to others as well. Social deviance can create social problems such as child abuse due to the chaos and irrational acts that disrupt the stability of a community. As somebody's deviant actions or thoughts cause others to question the norms of the dominant majority, social discomfort ensues. When people become uncomfortable, efforts are made to try and control these individuals and events and label them as deviant to create consequences for their actions. This can lead to a chain of events, starting with sexual aggression and abuse, and can produce pregnancy out of wedlock. This was the product of a study that was conducted about the deviance of homeless populations and how it leads to the problem of dating violence, especially among young adults. This can be seen as a form of deviance as well, because today's society places a macro level emphasis on a married mother and father. All these issues contribute to the issue of an unhealthy relationship between two parents who are labeled as deviant, which in turn produces projected violence and neglect onto their child. Ultimately, now the deviant family has disrupted and unbalanced in comparison to the societal norm of a functioning unit. This perpetuates the issue of child abuse because the relationships pinned by labels of abuse and neglect, which stem from dating violence and homeless populations. Social inequality is one of society's most pressing issues, which is also a large contributor to the social problem of child abuse. In the country of Brazil, some of the worst inequality exists in the world, especially for Brazilian children who have no opportunities for a well-rounded education. They start off their lives in a very dangerous cycle when their parents either do not provide support for them or they're simply unable to. This causes many children of Brazil to become social deviations who fall into a trap of failing school, running away from home, criminal behavior, early pregnancy, and drug use. These actions create a cycle of social inequality which produces yet another generation who is unable to successfully care for themselves and their children because their parents were first unable to care for them. A never-ending neglect circle becomes another societal norm. And the legal system allows for this as well, because Brazilian laws concerning the basic needs of children are not respected. So there is no external force driving parents to care for their child if they can barely care for themselves. Analyzing problems in relation to the education system can explain a lot about how this cycle is very difficult to break. Since education is seen as a valued resource in modern society, those with better education automatically have more access to resources such as good jobs, high incomes, and political positions. Therefore, children that live in poor areas are faced with social inequality because children that live in poor areas and are faced with social inequality also are now educationally disadvantaged as well. This can lead to them not being able to escape their current situation of their economic status. It is well known that child and domestic abuse has been observed to have a high correlation with lower income families, who generally struggle to provide for their members and succumb to substance abuse from stress. This places children in lower income families in a box, and their escape routes are rather slim because of the conflict perspective sees this unequal distribution of education effective, since it offers more opportunities to the powerful and affluent. Now, the situation has turned into children that suffer neglect in educational systems because of their predisposed position in society, and simultaneously suffer from abuse due to their parents' financial situation. Then these children will grow up with the same mannerisms, and the cycle of abuse continues. There are several factors that influence vulnerability, which include lack of income, health insurance, and health care. All of these contributors stem from different social problems categorized into psychological and social groups. Child abuse is perpetuated by those who fall into the realm of vulnerable populations, which is also influenced by the factors discussed before. Individuals who struggle with mental illness often have difficulty finding affordable health care options that adequately cover their conditions. The reason for this is many insurance providers either deny coverage or charge extremely high premiums for people who suffer from pre-existing conditions, who most likely also suffer from social and educational inequality. In addition, some populations that live in rural areas have extremely low incomes, lack the access to medical care, and in the case of mental illness, necessary prescriptions to help control their conditions. Child abuse stems from this issue because when a parent cannot take care of themselves mentally, they are in no state to properly care for their child. Abuse and neglect occur in these situations because healthcare corporations are not properly considering individuals who need help. Ultimately, public funding and medical policy